Welcome to Big Sexy Chat. On this episode, we're diving headfirst into fat liberation, podcast power, and the future of our rad community. We're joined by an all-star lineup of fat podcasters, including the dynamic voices behind Fat and Fucked and Wait For It. From recapping 2024's biggest moments to dreaming big for 2025, this roundtable is packed with insights, laughs, and the unapologetic energy you love.
Hi, welcome to Big Sexy Chat. I'm Crystal.
I'm Murph.
We're just two rad fatties sitting around,
Chewing the fat.
Twice a month, we'll be chatting about current events,
Hot topics.
sex toys, fat politics, fat community, cannabis, CBD, you name it, we're going to talk about it. We are very excited to have you a part of our community. Welcome and enjoy. We're so excited about what we're doing today. We're going to do a roundtable. We have some amazing guests today who are very involved in the fat community, and they know a lot of the stuff, a lot about fat liberation and fat rights, and we're excited to get into all that kind of fun stuff today. I definitely also want to learn about what they think they see in the future in 2025 for our rad community. So I want to introduce you all first to Dr. Krista Nabar. Is that how you say your last name? Dr. Sexy Fat. And Krista and Suzy are co-hosts of Fat and Fucked podcast, which we adore and love all the good stuff that they get into over there. And we also have, we have Ronald Jr. His podcast is Wait For It, WEIGHT, also amazing. And we met Ronald through Tigress, who, if you listen to our podcast, you hear the name Tigress probably every single episode practically. And then we're also excited to have Suzy Hooker here from Fat and Fucked. And Suzy's an artist and podcaster and fat liberationist, all kinds of fun stuff. So thank you all. Thank you for being here. Of course, Murph's here with me. All right. So let's get this started. We're going to start by asking all of the podcasters, I want each one of you to answer this question, all three of you, please. What do you see as the future of podcasting? And Suzy, why don't we start with you?
I think that given the political climate we're about to roll into, where media is being threatened so much with censorship and podcasts being the last arena of accessible media that is not regulated by the FCC, I imagine that podcasts, popular as they already are really going to skyrocket in terms of being a platform for people to say what they're really thinking. Not necessarily without fear, but I think that they're going to be heavily used for discourse on any number of things.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. Do you feel like there's a room for more fat podcasters?
I think there's room for as many fat voices as we can possibly get out into the world. Yes, absolutely. The more, the merrier.
100%. Thank you. Ronald, would you share with us your ideas about the future of podcasting, and do you think there's room for a lot more fat podcasters?
Definitely. I think, this year was probably a year that we saw move forward in terms of the space that podcasts can occupy, i.e. it's replacing traditional media in a way that it kind of wasn't before. We saw Obama had gone on Between Two Ferns, and he had gone on Mark Maron's What the Fuck. But now we saw two presidential candidates go on two popular podcasts this year as a mandated campaign stop. Not to mention, we saw what happened with Cat Williams on the Club Shay Shay podcast. And in the last couple of years, we saw that chat podcasts are really taking center, which is good. And the money has started to contract from podcasting, which made it more or less professional. It's kind of swinging back into place of a big year for people beginning to start up and realizing that they can wade into those waters as well. And I think, if there's room and those waters are expansive enough for everyone, there should be plenty of room for more fat voices in podcasting.
100%. And we definitely need it to be more varied, a lot more intersectionality. We need a lot more people of color and other voices to get up in here and, let's talk. And I always like to offer to help support anybody who wants to start podcasting. I'm not an expert, but I know how to get it started. And so if anybody's listening out there, you want to get some information, I'm happy to jump on a call with you and let's figure this out, because the more the merrier, and it's going to be better for our whole entire community. So what about you, Krista? What do you think?
Yeah, I always
when I think about the future of podcasting, I just think about accessibility in terms of being able to access information and voices and people in a very accessible sort of way. But also doing a podcast equipment than what I thought. I didn't need a microphone today, so after my technical difficulties, but I just think that being able to communicate about really important and sometimes very niche issues and issues that we want to be less niche, right? Like fat liberation. I think podcasting is a fantastic place for all of that to happen.
I agree. Ronald, I noticed that you were mentioned in the New York Times last year, 2023. Is that the case? Tell us about that a little bit.
Wait for it. So Wait for it was named as one of the best podcasts of 2023 by the New York Times, which was pretty cool. And they made a selection. We were among some pretty good shows, which felt good. And it was kind of like the start of a pretty good run for the show.
Hell yeah. Amy Poehler is one of my favorites. She's so great. But yeah, I saw that. And I was like, wow. So that they just randomly found you somehow, and someone that was listener, and they thought this is it.
I think we were picked as a Tribeca selection in 2023. So that gave us some buzz before we launched. And then we got a good amount of listeners in the fall. And I think it was just the New York Times folks, they pretty much monitor what's going on at Tribeca and all that. So I think we were already kind of like on their radar. And so it kind of worked out for us towards the end of the year.
Tell us a little bit more about your podcast and the goal of your podcasting, and what your kind of information you share with your guests, your community.
Wait for it is a narrative podcast that kind of tackles the ways in which we think about our weight. So the opening line is, I can't remember a time I wasn't thinking about my weight. And it kind of tells the story of like my own grapplings and dealings like with my body in a world that oftentimes feels like it doesn't fit. And so much of season 1 is kind of more memoir, more me talking about very personal stories. Season 2, we add a few more perspectives and have a couple of interviews as well. But the whole idea is to kind of like talk about the nuanced conversations that folks are having, whether fat or otherwise, and the ways in which that we're thinking about our weight all the time.
Amen to that. That's for sure. Since the 3rd grade, I haven't stopped. I'm 56 now. So how can people find your podcast? I'm sure you're on every platform possible.
Everywhere you listen. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're out there. YouTube, even, we're out there.
Yeah, us too. We're doing YouTube pretty intensely now. We're trying to make sure we have all of our recordings on YouTube as well. So we're catching up. So besides the New York Times, what was your biggest accomplishment this past year, or what kind of accomplishment were you excited for the fat community?
I think probably for the show, we were on the Drew Barrymore show, which was cool. Just still talking about like generally about like what the show is trying to accomplish. But we also won 3 Podcast Academy Awards, that was pretty dope, especially in a room with people that we did not expect to be competing against. In some cases, like there was like indie podcast categories and regular categories, and we swept all 3 of them, which felt really good. So that was probably the biggest for the podcast itself. In terms of personally with Fat Community, I attended my first Fat Con. I went to Philly Fat Con, and in the process of producing the show, met a lot of folks who were listening to the show and were like, yo, this really resonated, or this specific thing that you said here, I was thinking about this specific thing. So being able to meet some of those listeners in person, as well as like build relationships with other folks working in Fat Community, that has been a big year for me personally, as well as for the show. So I'd say that'd be my biggest 2024 accomplishment.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Dr. Sexy Fat. Tell us a little bit more about fat and fat.
Yeah. So this was Suzy's brainchild. She had the wonderful idea of talking about fat liberation, but also the other ways that fat people are also fucked in maybe more pleasurable kinds of ways. And so we talk about it being an integration of fat liberation and sexual liberation. So our episodes, sometimes we like to sprinkle in a few of just Suzy and I talking about certain topics, but we do a lot of interviews with people. We really try to talk about really important facets of fat liberation and sexual liberation, but we try to make it a little fun and light when we can. We like to goof off. We like to play games. And so, we try to create an enjoyable listening experience, I'll say.
Awesome. Yeah, we had fun being on your show, and that was a fun episode. It's one of our top listened to episodes, actually.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah. Okay, so what about you? Suzy, you're going to go back to Oregon. You're not there right now, but how's life in Oregon for the most part?
I'm not gonna lie, life in Oregon has been challenging. I have not been able to secure steady employment. And come to find out, leaving a community that I built for 40 years in the middle of my life after a divorce and my career in reality TV ending of my own will, it was a hard transition for sure. The nature out there is beautiful. The fat community out there is like nothing I've ever experienced in person. And I got to spend some really great time with family, but it was a more challenging transition than I anticipated, honestly.
But y'all were able to keep the podcast going, and you took a break for a little while, but you're back, right? Everything's okay with the podcast?
Yeah, we did take a brief break. There have been a lot of moving parts and pieces in both mine and Krista's lives outside of the podcast. So we have been working really hard to build up a little bit of a backlog so that when we come back right after the new year, we will have lots of great episodes to share with people right from the jump and give ourselves a little bit of lead time to deal with the moving parts and pieces. But yes, we are still actively producing.
What was your thing? I'm so glad to hear that. What was your favorite thing as far as fat community in 2024? Anything super exciting that you thought, wow, thank God, finally?
This is on a personal note for me. One of my dear friends in Portland, shout out to Jessica because she's also a listener of all the pods. She had her 40th birthday, and she is a Portland native that has been really conscientious about cultivating a fat community there. And it's the first time in my life that I had ever attended a party. I think there were about 60 people there. There were maybe 3 straight size people. That's a first for me to be in a crowd where I wasn't thinking, oh, look, I'm the fattest person in the room again. It was amazing. There were so many wonderful, beautiful, interesting, vibrant, fat people everywhere. And that's just not an experience I'd had before. So personally, that felt fantastic to know that that kind of thing is possible.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing to be within fat community. I live in San Jose, and there used to be a really large, they used to call it BBW, late night fun stuff, fun parties and stuff. And then Tigress, of course, used to have her events up in Oakland. And it's so different to be at a party, having fun, dancing with all fat people. It's like so powerful to be around people that look just like you. It's like mind boggling. You feel so free, I guess is a good word to use. Like, wow, let it all out.
I felt like that with FatCon, where it was
Yeah.
just so many other individuals where you just felt like I'm safe. Like this feels good. It was a great experience.
Murph, do you have any other than that, anything that you were kind of excited about in 2024 for the fat community or personal?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Your Fat Friend film coming out really highlighted a kind of a personal story like Ronald was talking about. Like I really enjoy hearing those types of things, and that may be the therapist in me, but it's like it gives you more context to the human experience, and I don't think we've had a lot of sharing about what it's like to be in a fat body, and so the film really had a big impact on me.
Murph, I'll stick with you for a moment. Any huge disappointments in 2024 that you want to think about, remind us all about, or talk about?
The Ozempic craze, I think, has been my biggest disappointment. I just saw that like they've approved it for sleep apnea as a treatment for sleep apnea. It's just like it just seems to spiral and get worse. And I'm terrified of what's going to bring in 2025 because Elon Musk has already said he thinks that every fat person should have to be on it, so that they're not a tax to the health system. So who knows what that's going to bring with him being second in command or technically first in command.
Someone needs to educate him about the tax that fat people. If you can't hear me or see my air quotes, I'm using air quotes right now because there is no fucking fat tax that people say, oh, we're having to fund you being fat. I'm like, no, you're not. I pay taxes like everybody else. I don't get I don't get any bonus for being fat. I don't get anything free for being fat. I glorify obesity, but yeah, I know he thinks what everybody else thinks, which is like, you're costing the insurance, business so much money, but we're not. It's just such bullshit. But I know he'll never hear that. He'll never want to know that. I'm sure he hates fat people. And he was on Ozempic, remember?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Ronald, let's start with you on this one. What do you dream for 2025 for fat community? What, besides all the amazing new podcasts that we hope are going to be birthed in 2025, what else are you hoping for?
I mean, I feel like I don't know if this is specific for 2025 or more as just the future, but I would love to see the conversation evolve. And feel this is probably combined with my disappointment, but I feel disheartened by everything that happened with Ozempic. And as a result, I thought that the conversation was going to shift after 2020. I thought that the conversation was going to shift after 2020. And it felt like that's not exactly what happened with this move into Ozempic and beyond. And as a result, it feels like we got dragged backwards, but almost backwards into a different timeline where weight loss drugs now exist, and as a result, it feels like we're not going to have the conversations we need to be having about like bigger plane size seats or finding fashion for everybody, like the conversation that we need to be having about everyone and talking about how we feel and romance and all that, and in ways that actually are inclusive of fat folks. So my hope always for the future is that we start having those conversations with nuance and like in community with straight size folks, so we could just be like, stop doing this, essentially. But I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. But that's always going to kind of be my hope for 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, it feels like we're moving backwards for sure. Back to like 10 years ago, before things got really exciting in the fat community, before people started to feel seen. Now I feel like it's going backwards. Also, I want to say we know that Ozempic is a great drug for people with diabetes. That's who it was meant for. And then it got really perverted from there, and it's unfortunate. But it's like almost like they're trying to eradicate us fat people. And that feels shitty. It really does. Suzy, what about you? What are you hoping for 25?
I think my great hope for 2025 is that as we, as a society and a culture, hone in more on what it means to have intersectional identities and how all of those intersections are tied in, related, and can't really be untangled in this quest for liberation. I would like to see fat liberation or just fatness recognized as an important intersectional identity in the quest for civil rights, equity, justice for everyone. I feel like we have not gotten there yet. And I think tied in with my disappointment is that with all of the Ozempic stuff, I felt like we were maybe on the cusp of getting there, where existing in a fat body was going to be recognized as this marginalized identity that needed the same kind of attention, involvement, engagement with the activist liberation community as a whole. That's what I hope for 2025, is that we can be pulled into the greater integrated fight for liberation and justice for all.
Absolutely. It has to happen for sure. Did I ask you about your biggest disappointment in 2024? I can't remember if I did or not. Sorry, Suzy.
You did not, but
Okay.
I am very much in line with what Murph and Ronald both said. The Ozempic skinny stick craze has been really disheartening. I think if I had to wrap it all up into one sentence, my great disappointment was when Krista and I were having a conversation offline, and Krista said, all fat influencers are not fat liberationists. And that just kind of really struck home to me, that these people that I had been kind of looking up to in terms of a fat liberation inspiration, I was mistaken. I made them into something that they weren't, and when those shingles fell away, it kind of hurt.
100%. There's a lot we learn now that there are a lot of them are not fat liberationists, and it's very disappointing for sure. It's kind of broke my heart a little bit, I have to say. So, Krista, do you want to elaborate on that particular topic about the fat people that are fat activists and fat influencers that are not fat activists, or not fat liberationists, I should say?
Yeah, no, I just think that so some of my movement toward fat liberation started with social media, like with a lot of people, when we actually get to start seeing people like us living their lives and looking fabulous and saying things about how it's okay to be fat, both explicitly and implicitly. And so, I experienced that same level of disappointment when I did start to see some of those people that I'd been watching talking about what I eat in a day and doing before and after photos and videos of working out at the gym. And I have a lot of complex feelings about that, but it becomes more lonely, I guess, because there is community here. There's still plenty of us here. And also when we start seeing people who are we thought were part of our crew, it seems that they're not. It's very disheartening and disappointing. And so all the more reason why we need to connect even more with each other and be more outspoken if we can.
What's that one saying? If it's really about health, then why do you need a before and after photo?
Totally.
Right. Do you have anything to add to that?
I'm really to the point where it feels like, appreciating another influencer, or getting involved in their life. I'm so cautious now. Like, I just feel like I have to do so much work in determining, like, is this somebody I really want to believe or engage with? Because it feels like disappointment after disappointment in this process. Like, I really fell for Lizzo. Like, I fell deep into Lizzo, and to watch what has happened as of recent, it hurts my soul. Like, it hurts. And so I think it's just made me more cautious, and I think that's something that we don't need in this community. We need the embrace you all, bring you in, let's talk, let's, you're safe, let's go. But now I just feel like I'm putting everything at arm's length. Like, oh yeah, I'm interested, but I also don't want to, really dive deep into whatever it is with that person.
Ronald, you had something to say? You have something to share?
So we just did an episode of Wait For It called The Core, in which we talk about, we're addressing listener questions. And one of the questions that came in was, I did an episode earlier in the season. So it's like an episode, I'm going back 2 episodes to explain this other episode. So there's an earlier episode we did in the season of Wait For It with Martinez Evans, fat marathon runner. And we were talking about Ozempic. I won't take it, and I won't do bariatric surgery. It's just two things I just don't want to do ever. And mostly because of I feel like the price is too high for whatever goals you have after that. Like, the price is just too high. And I mentioned that, and I had a listener reach out, who was like, love the show. I'm on a GLP-1, and I felt like y'all were being very dismissive of this. And what we got to the root of in this episode, The Core, was this idea that, like, no matter what a fat person does, like, there's going to be some judgment from everybody else behind it. And one of the things that bothered me about Lizzo was that, like, for whatever decision she decided to lose weight, whatever, that's on her. Like, we do a lot of talk about, like, especially existing in fat bodies and what it's like. And so it's not surprising to me when a fat person decides to lose weight. I try not to take it personally. What I do take personally is the reaction that everyone has, and the way the weight loss is presented. And the way she's presenting it is really, really, really irking me. It's really irking me. Like, you know, yeah, you know what you're doing when you do this. And then on top of that, there's all these people in the comments that are all like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, go for it. That are being so encouraging, like the keep going people out there. And it's just like, I think that's what really irked me about all of this. Especially because I think if we're saying, if a fat person loses weight tomorrow and they are still an advocate and a part of the community and all of that, then as far as I'm concerned, I don't care. You know what I mean? But what bothers me is when they cross this Rubicon and all of a sudden it's like they forget that they were fat, or they forget what it was like to be a fat person. And all of a sudden we're people that shouldn't exist. And I worked hard enough, so you should do it too. Like there's just, I think that's what really irks me about the whole thing. And I wish we could get to a place where we could get beyond and have like some real conversations about what it's like to just say, oh, well, I just hated my body because I was fat. Like, I wish we could just get to that place, and it just doesn't seem like we're able to get there. I didn't mean to be long-winded. Sorry.
No, you're great. I mean, they do believe thin people more than they believe fat people. And now these people are newly thin. You would think they're coming from the most personal, best place to come from as an ally to other fat people. Like, I've been on both sides of this, but I haven't seen that yet from any of them. It's all one-sided.
And it will be easier. I mean, it seems like it'd be easier because you're being heard to say that. To say like, yeah, I'm street size now, but these plane seats still should be bigger. They're still too small. Like, I've lost 200 pounds and I'm still squeezed into the seat. I can't imagine. Do you know what it was like when I was 200 pounds heavier? Like, they might listen to you. And then instead, you're just looking cute in clothes and taking before and after pictures and acting like hard work all paid. Like, what?
Yeah. Krista, I saw you have something to say. I want to come back to that for sure. I want to come back to you on that particular point. But talking about the airlines, I want people to make sure they know that they shouldn't take on that guilt. If you can't fit into an airplane seat, most people can't. And it's the airline's fault. They're the ones who are greedy and tried to cram so many people in there. But anyway, Krista, I want to hear what you have to say about this.
Right on with the airlines. Absolutely. I think I just wanted to put out there, I am very curious to see what's going to happen over the next few years with Ozempic, and with, are people going to be able to sustain this weight loss? And either are people going to turn their backs and say, oh, we made a mistake. The Ozempic, the weight loss drugs are not actually what we thought they were. Or are we going to do some other sort of perversion of trying to figure out how to say that they're not actually a bad idea for weight loss? And I'm just very curious to see what happens. And, are we going to see all of these people start their weight to climb again? And what's going to be public reaction when that happens?
Right, because they have no problem accepting the compliment that, oh, hey, you're skinny now. This is fantastic, right? Like, so when the pendulum swings the other way and you've put some of that weight back on and they're like, oh, you're going back for seconds, or, like, those comments are going to come back at you full force. Those don't go away. And so the concept of like, oh, I fixed it. I think of that when people talk about bariatric surgery. It's like, I fixed the problem. It's like, you did not fix the problem. The problem is in your brain, and you've got to work through all the emotional, complex parts of that. And you haven't done any of that work. You're just in a smaller body. That's
Also,
it.
Sorry to interrupt, and sorry to just jump in, and sorry to not raise my hand.
Yeah.
But also, no one's talking about the fact that you got to take this shot forever. Like, what? I'm blown by that's not. People are like, so you're committed to taking a shot you think that's going to work the rest of your life? You think there's no plateau? There's no free lunch with nature. So there's no way to where you think this is going to work out. So it's upsetting that like we're going to be on this show and like let's agree to come back in 3 years and just say, wow, I'm unsurprised that there's these complications that come with this, and for a shot that you have to take for the rest of your life. Like, my mother recently died of endometrial cancer, and it was hard. And she had to take this, she had to take a blood thinner. I think it's called Lovenox. She had to take a blood thinner. The blood thinner that she had to take, ostensibly she was going to be taking a shot for the rest of her life because the cancer was causing her blood to be coagulative. So because they could not cure the cancer, they had to use this in order to stop her blood from doing something that would give her strokes. So I'm saying, like, if you're using a medication to stop something else and the something else isn't what you're being resolved, that means you're going to be on that medication for the rest of your life. And I'm like, who's committing to that? I'm sorry I'm getting amped up, but like y'all are really hitting a nail with me. I have like strong feelings about the GLP-1 drugs.
You're in the right place. Suzy, you had raised your hand. Do you have something to share with that?
Yes, I did. I am currently on a GLP-1 drug for diabetes, and I've been on it for long enough that I saw the weight loss. And as a diabetic, I'm on a much lower dose than the people that are on it for weight loss. It works like a fucking dream for diabetes. It's literally a miracle drug for diabetes. And I did initially lose some weight, but guess what? After a year, just like all of the science from Novo Nordisk themselves says, that weight all came back. And I also wanted to add, this might be in kind of a reverse order, and I may have lost the plot with how I was going to tie this into the combo, but I also had a weight loss surgery in 2008 when I was in a very different headspace before I made it into the fat liberation sphere. And I can say without a single moment of hesitation, I wish I had never done it. It's the one thing I regret in my life. And that's because the quote unquote cure has been much worse for my overall health than me being fat ever was. The complications have lasted until today and have made things infinitely more challenging for me in my pursuit of actual health than my pursuit back then of weight loss and the magic bullet. So I just wanted to throw that in there, that like the cure is worse than the issue that I was in my own brain presenting with. So
Yeah, it's
buyer
great for
beware.
diabetics. It's great for diabetics. I've heard people say their A1C just plummets down as soon as they start taking it. That's who it was designed for. But I do want to say, how many of you know people that have been fat and thin from like 2 different weight loss surgeries and Ozempic, and now they're fat again? That's the worst. I feel terrible because, they've been so lauded and, people are, oh my God, you look so great. And then they're fat again. Oh, that looks terrible to me. I wouldn't want to be in that spot.
One of the things that we also wanted to ask was basically what's I think we might have already kind of said this, but what is your wish for fat liberation in 2025? Like, what do you want to see? And it doesn't have to be, it could be something personal, but it could also be something just across the board. Go for it.
Yeah. So I'm going to take 2. I definitely sort of going back to something that Suzy said about adding fatness to as an intersection, and thinking about it more in terms of it being something that affects how we experience and are experienced by the world. I would love to take that to the next level and see more anti-discrimination policies adding fatness and body size. It's happened in a few places, New York, Michigan. It can happen in your organization, your company. I just want I'm hoping that these that have been done are enough of a spark to sort of move that forward, because our society is not going to do it by itself. And so I think that, doing it through that kind of policies and things like that is what actually needs to happen. And the other piece is just awareness of fat liberation. There's so many people that I talk to on a regular basis that are just so floored by the fact that this is an ideology, that this is something that they can also access and is true. And so, tying it back to podcasting, we're doing the Fat Lord's work.
I like that. That's fantastic. Suzy, how about for you? What do you want the fat liberation community to have in 2025?
I think the simple answer is I would like the fat liberation community to just continue to expand. I know so many people, or have been introduced to so many people, that are, like Krista just said, just waking up to the fact that this is a valid ideology to apply to the world. I hope to watch and witness more people step into the fat lib community. That's my greatest wish. It's really that simple for me.
I couldn't agree more. Ronald, how about you?
I think I already answered, but I could do it again. No problem. Okay. So I think in 2025, it's kind of like the same wish that I have, like kind of over, like just generally for the future, which is that like we continue to have these kind of conversations that we seem to have been missing, which is like that are more nuanced, and that are in community with straight size folks that are talking about kind of the personhood of fat people and what like what that can be when we're all more kind and compassionate to one another, especially when it comes to our body sizes. Like weight is something that everybody thinks about, whether you're straight sized or fat. And the fact that we know that should be something that we should be connecting on. And we are our own enemies. We could change it tomorrow and just say, hey, let's just stop elevating one body. We don't have to keep elevating one body anymore. We can elevate more than one body. You know what I mean? We can elevate as many bodies as we want. So I would love to get to a place where we're having those conversations in community with straight size folks in a productive way.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I just recently had at my Leadership Institute, I'm part of a cohort thing for healthcare here in California. And one of the concepts that we discussed was that your allies are actually probably more powerful than you are. And they have the ability to speak to the issue that you're experiencing. And I would love to see more of that. I agree with everything everyone has said. Like, I want all of those things, but I also really want to see the straight size folks going out and paying attention to the chairs for their fat friends at a restaurant that they're meeting at. Pay attention to the fact that when you walk into a medical facility, there's chairs that have arms on them and it's not comfortable for people to sit down, and make comments about those things and speak to those things in a way that doesn't come off as you're the bitchy fat person that did it. So there's so many things that I think our community needs, but I would love to see that happen more often. Crystal, how about you?
Yeah, I'd like to be the bitchy fat person less often in 2025. No, actually, I don't mind that role. I don't mind if I can help. Especially a lot of people haven't found their voice yet, and if I found mine, so I don't mind being the bitchy fat person.
Yeah, well, we absolutely want everyone to know where they can find you. So if you could share your socials and your podcast, but if you could spell out your socials, that would be really helpful for the listeners. And then we'll talk after we're done. So Suzy, start us off.
Okay, you can find me personally at Suzy, SUZY .hooker, HOOKER at Instagram. There's a lot of anti-capitalist and like fairy and cat memes there. If you're more interested in the podcast in particular, we're at Fat and Fucked Pod, just like it sounds. And we're on anywhere you listen, you can find us.
Awesome. Thank you. Ronald?
You can find me on Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok for the time being at It's Big Rob. That's at OHITSBIGRON. Equals to the podcast. Wait for it. WEIGHT. It's available everywhere you get your podcasts. And I host another podcast called Pop Culture Debate Club from Limonada and the BBC, which you can also find everywhere you get your podcast.
Fantastic. And Dr. Sexy
Yes.
Fat.
So I'm on Instagram at dr.sexyfat, one word. And my practice website is www.carolinaswc.org.
Fantastic. And you can find us at BigSexyChat on all of the socials. And we're not on X or Twitter or whatever anymore, but I don't know if we've created a Blue Skies account. Have we done that yet? No, so we got to get on that. So you can find us at BigSexyChat.com, and you can email us at BigSexyChatPod@gmail.com with any questions or thoughts or information you'd like to share. And as always, for everyone listed on this pod, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, give their information, put it out there to the world, because we want more voices in 2025 talking the fat lib story. So please.
Yes, true. More of all of you, please. I could listen to all three of you all day and all night. There's so much to talk about, and so many, like Ronald said, there's a lot of nuance out there too that we need to start looking into and discussing. So I appreciate all of you. I appreciate Murph. Murph is always my favorite bestie co-host. She's so great. And so is Ashley. Thank you, Ashley, for all of your production and editing love. And Ronald, Suzy, Krista, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm just going to say, see you later, alligator.
After a while, crocodile.
Sayonara, capybara.
Oh, see that? You took mine, Ronald. Later, babe.
Let's build a better future for fat folks.
Thanks, everybody.